this heaven?
No. It's Iowa.
Extra, extra, read all about it. Southern Belle nearly saves man from Mormon cult using her vagina.
Who told you that?
Joyce McKinney, straight from the horse's mouth to your ears.
I don't think she's the most reliable source. You might want to take everything she says with an IV of salt.
If she's so untrustworthy, tell me this, Eric. Can you put a marshmallow in a parking meter?
Oh, don't know what to say about that.
I rest my case. It's Tabloid on the Pod of Dreams.
Once upon a time, there was a little princess, the most beautiful little princess in all the land.
Kinky sex, religion, a beauty queen, Mormon missionaries, kidnapped at gunpoint. There was something in that story for everyone. It was a perfect tabloid story.
When I met my Kirk, it was like in the movies. When Juliet looks at Romeo and it's
She had fallen in love with him and become obsessed by him.
the next thing I know, he vanished into thin air. I found him in England. The Mormons had him.
Joyce set up this plan.
I knew there was only one way to get Kirk out of Mormonism, and that was to make love with him. Kirk and I went to this cottage. We made love for 3 days. It was like a honeymoon.
This bizarre story began here last Wednesday. A young Mormon missionary was kidnapped, driven to a house, blindfolded, and his legs shackled.
I couldn't believe it. It was just like shock.
It was in all the papers.
Were you surprised to be put in prison?
I really didn't feel I'd done anything wrong.
Scenario number 1, fake gun, chloroform, tied up, sexual impropriety. Second version is Joyce's story. The Mormons get him, brainwash him, all of a sudden he's claiming rape.
A guy either wants to have sex or he doesn't. That's like putting a marshmallow in a parking meter.
The British Isles was on fire with the Joyce McKinney story.
I was a celebrity.
She was having the time of her life. Disguises and wigs.
Worms crawl out of the woodwork when you become famous.
They had a tip, 38, 24, 36. Your fantasy is her speciality.
The press went crazy.
They said I was a whore.
Oh my heck, as they say in Utah.
She went barking mad. She disappeared a day later.
It's not a porno story like these crazy newspapers have tried to make it. It's a love story.
You know, you can tell a lie long enough till you believe it.
All right, Eric. So we've got a lot going on with this documentary. We've got how media portrays stories, what rights people should have to control their own narratives in the media, what is truth, religious indoctrination, and a whole lot of other really fun stuff happening in this documentary. With that in mind, Eric, how crazy do you think Joyce McKinney is?
She's pretty cuckoo. Super bonkers. So maybe go through a little bit and explain, because I don't know. I didn't know this story before I saw this documentary. Didn't know who Joyce McKinney was or anything. Why don't you just kind of walk through just the main beats of this documentary? Because it's like one bonkers thing after another.
It is. So, I mean, and just to put my cards on the table, I'm a big fan of Errol Morris, the director of this movie. Of the stuff of his I've seen, I think this movie is the most accessible. So in the meager platform we have, and in the context of this conversation, if I can get anybody slightly on the Errol Morris train, I thought this might be the movie to do it, because it is such a insane story it's a lot of things, but it's not boring. So Joyce McKinney was apparently like Miss Wyoming or some sort of, pageant woman from North Carolina who, depending on whose version you ask,
she's a beauty queen.
Beauty queen, that's a better term for it. Beauty queen. Depending on whose version you decide you want to take, either fell in love with a Mormon who was unfortunately, forced to stay Mormon despite the fact that he loved her and wanted to be with her, or she just got obsessed with a semi-random dude and kidnapped him. But what did happen was the most important thing is that that is objectively true is that she paid a pilot and a bodyguard and some guy who is kind of her cuckold dude. I don't even know what his real story is. BDSM
He
slave.
wasn't interviewed, right? He was the guy that never.
He had died. So the guy, there's two guys that are like that. The one that went with her to England, he passed away in like 2003 or 4. Anyway, she has a bunch of money, which we don't know how she gets money at the point in the story, but she goes to England where this Mormon is because she likes this Mormon guy.
Well, it was. She said it was her fiance, right? That they were engaged.
Yeah, she claims they promised to get married, that they were in love with each other. There's reasons to think that might not be true, but she thinks she was really into this guy, and then to her words, he just vanished. But what had happened, he was doing his mission, which is a thing Mormons do, and I think they turn 19. They have to go to some other country and spread the word of Joseph Smith and Jesus Christ and do all that stuff.
The religious mission. That Mormons aren't the only ones that do that, but yeah.
No, but it's particular. Like every man has to do it when they're 19 if you're a Mormon.
Is that right? Okay.
Yes, all it's literally required. It's a mandatory thing.
We can talk about Mormonism.
We're going to have to talk about religion at some point. We're going to get there. There's a lot going on. Anyway, she commissions a guy to fly her around and to help her potentially kidnap. She doesn't lead with the kidnapping, but then she gets a guy to kidnap the man that she's in love with and claims it's her fiance, who's in a cult. She whisks him away.
She said he comes with her, right? She didn't admit she kidnapped him.
Well, from her version, right? Well, this is what I love about Aaron Moore's documentaries. I mean, the truth is an ephemeral, fickle thing. So her version is she went there, talked to him. He willingly came with her to some cottage in a quaint little part of England called Devon.
And they just boned for like a week.
They boned 7 times. They said the number apparently 7 times. She made him all his favorite food. They had a really romantic. She kept referring to it as a honeymoon. And he's like, "Great, I love you. This is awesome. I'm happy to be with you." But people were worried and claimed that he was kidnapped, and everybody in the Mormon church said he was kidnapped, and his family was really worried about
it. And raped. Kidnapped and raped.
Well, the rape stuff. So this is where we should just, scratch this on. This is Joyce's version. The rape comes later because she claims he had sex with her willingly, that it was consensual, and they boned, and they were very happy throughout this weekend. And he said, "I love you and I want to be with you," but everybody's panicking and worried, like they're claiming you kidnapped me, and people are on a manhunt and they're looking for you, and this is, a really big problem. So let me go tell everybody I'm okay. I'll see you again. Love you, sweetheart. See you later. And then he goes away and never comes back. And the version that gets told is the raped version, that he was taken against his will, that he was raped, forced to have sex against his will.
Yeah, because he gets away. He gets away. And then he goes to the police, and she's arrested and charged with kidnapping, and he says that she raped him over the course of whatever the time that they were at this cottage.
Yeah, 3 days, I think. It was like a Friday through Sunday or something like that.
And she says that's like putting a marshmallow in a parking meter.
Well, that's one of her defenses. Like, how could she rape him? Because he clearly got arrested.
A woman can't rape a man in her mind.
And when we say rape, and this part is also agree. He was the first time they did it, at least, he was tied down.
Spread eagle, right? The one guy talks spread eagle. I love the guy said spread eagle over and over again. Over and over again.
He loved that phrase, and it was super funny. But he's spread eagle, and she took off his magical Mormon underwear, and this is another religious thing.
Mormon underwear, we got to talk about that at some point, too.
We're going to get into all the Mormon stuff, because this documentary has an ex-Mormon on it named Troy Williams. He's a gay man, former member of the church, and a media personality, journalist. I don't know what his official profession is, but he's on there to really validate a lot of the stuff which you might not believe about Mormons and say that this is literally true. Like, this actually happens. And he talked about how Mormons do get a special underwear. It's part of, it's not confirmation, but some of their upbringing in the church. And it's meant to ward off Satan. And this is ingrained in them at a very young age. He talked about there are people who have left the Mormon church and they still wear that underwear because there's a part of their brain it's like, well, maybe if I take this off, it's going to be really problematic. I got to keep it on. Because when he takes it off, according to both Joyce and the guy who was raped or not, he started reading out a bunch of prayers in fear and horror. So this is the thing he might have done even if he did it willingly. But her justification for tying him up was that if he's tied down, he can let go and actually have sex, and it won't be his fault because he's tied down, so he can really let go of all of his really intense, ingrained Mormon hang-ups about sex. I mean, there's loads.
Right, and so just to speed it up a bit, so there's this section where she kidnaps this guy, fiance, rape, consensual, there's this debate. She gets arrested and sent to prison, right? She actually went to prison in England.
Jail. She gets jail. Yeah, she's in jail. She manages to apparently at some point smuggle a letter out of her vagina and her butt, and gets up somebody to mail that to the press in like the U.S. or in the U.K. or whatever.
And then it becomes a big story, like a big news story.
Massive media story.
And this is late 70s, right? Like 77,
78.
Okay,
yep,
right.
77, 78. Yep, late 70s. And becomes a big, big thing. She eventually gets let out on bail, and she's basically like a rock star for a while. She's seeing Keith Moon and going to movie premieres and doing all sorts of extravagant stuff. And then in the midst of all this, she's on bail, right? She hasn't had a trial. She hasn't been like officially convicted or whatever they do in the UK, whatever the UK version of conviction is. And she sneaks away. She manages to get into an airplane by pretending to be a deaf-mute person, getting into Canada, pulling an Argo, basically, getting into Canada, and then she gets from Canada into the U.S., where at that point she's going to, calls and sells her story rights to one of these sleazy, the Daily Mirror is one of them. There's a couple of sleazy tabloids in the U.K. that, this is really where the story is a huge deal, apparently. She tells her version. Meanwhile, there's another sleazy journalist, organization that's digging up stuff about her. And they find out that she's got this very illicit past as a sex worker who would do BDSM stuff, naked shoots, and apparently oral sex. Although we don't have any evidence that she ever went further than that.
Right, because there's this in the beginning of the documentary, there's all these questions about like, how did she pay for this? How did she get this money? Right. And it's never really clear.
She's renting
so they hide that part of the story, right? They hide that part of the story until after she becomes a big deal, and then these news outlets start uncovering. Well, maybe she made all this money from sex work, and that's kind of like the second layer to the story. Is not only does she in this Mormon church. What is the term they called her? The Manacle Mormon? Is that something like that?
The man was the guy. Kirk is that man's name.
Oh, he's the Manacle Mormon, right?
Yeah, his arms are manacled, and he's the Mormon.
That was the story, the main, the first news story. But then it's this tabloidy piece where it's like, let's dig up dirt on her and find out her past and start releasing stuff that doesn't make her look very good. And that's kind of, I felt like that was kind of the point of the documentary, right? It's called Tabloid. It's about that sort of journalism that didn't really exist a whole lot before that, as far as I understand.
Oh, no. I mean, there have been tabloids and yellow journals for a long time. I think
but it's the explosion of that, right? Like where, now it's just as soon as somebody becomes popular, let's find dirt, dig it up and spread it out there. Whereas that happens now when, whenever there's a news story, there's going to be dirt on that person.
Well, sure. But I think it's more about the tension, right? So one of the tabloid papers she sells her story to, and they're basically printing everything she says verbatim. They're giving completely her side of the story, which of course is filtered through her own subjective lenses designed to make her look good. And then the other side of that is somebody wants to make her look as awful as possible. You have the absolute flip side of that.
That one guy, the one insane. That they interviewed was such a creep that whatever.
Oh, he was. I know. He's laughing nonchalantly, and he's callous and doesn't care. I know. You hear that, and he's just joking. He fleeces some guy, gets a bunch of information from some guy that could have made a bunch of money with what information he had, but he just dupes him and even sends him to Mexico so that other tabloid papers can't get to him and get his information. I know, he was a real scuzzbag. The whole thing is slimy.
Right. So
and it doesn't help you get to the truth of who the person is or what's happening. Because despite her sex work, I don't know, is she doing anything morally wrong? I don't think so. It was consensual, and she was just making a bunch of money doing sex stuff for dudes in the classified ads or whatever. But it shapes her perception, and it crushes her narrative of being some like Christian princess trying to save this guy from the creepy Mormons.
So then they don't extradite her. She's like kind of living in America. She gets arrested for stalking this guy again, right? A few years later.
In the airport in 84. Yeah. So
And then you think the story's over, and then there's this bit at the last half hour about her living at home with her parents, getting attacked by a dog, and then cloning her pit bull. Like, it was just like, what? What does this have to do with any of these other stories? But I guess that happened in her life. That was the part where I was like, this is not real, right?
No, yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with the main narrative, but I think it was so crazy that it had to be included. You're like, you can't not share that.
She's like the first person to clone a pet or something like that, right?
Yeah, she spent a bunch of money. She had a pit of her dog's tissue shipped to South Korea, where a guy cloned her dog. Yeah, she spent loads of money on that. Yeah, it was just nutso. I mean,
and then she had like 7 of her same dog that was cloned, and there was
5.
the bit.
There were 5.
Oh, 5. Yeah. Okay. Well, there was the bit where she's like the dog that was attacked, and she was like, she said she almost died from the dog attack too, which was also kind of wild. But that like the dog that died would like open the door for her and get things out of the fridge, and then these cloned puppies would do that too without her training them. I don't know. That's the part where it started to seem like this woman is just making all of this up. But I mean, there's evidence of it. I guess part of it's true.
So, well, right, but it's tough to draw the line because she's not making everything she says isn't a complete lie. I don't think, but there's some exaggerations, and she adds always an element of somebody's out to get her. The dog attacked her because somebody deliberately messed with the dog's allergy medication.
Oh, yeah, that's right. The prednisone, they didn't give the right dosage, so then the dog went crazy.
And they did it on purpose. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't anything else. Nothing else happened. It was that somebody gave him the wrong allergy medication, and that's why he attacked her. I'm like, okay. And then talk about the dog getting everything for her, getting her cans of pop. I'm like, okay, maybe, possible. I'm skeptical because I think you should be skeptical about most things. But certainly when you hear this one talk about everything, it's like, okay.
So that's it, though. That's the end of the story. Like, and that's the end of the documentary. I guess I kept thinking the whole time, like, why did you pick this movie? Why this? Well, what's the reason?
It's entertaining, and yet there's a billion things going on. There's a billion things to talk about. There's a billion ways to look at it. It's a movie that I find endlessly entertaining. It's funny. I mean, I laugh repeatedly throughout the movie. There's so many clever edits, like the guy that keeps saying spread eagle. So Aaron Morse would have the words that people would say at various times like come across the screen. So the guy would say spread eagle, and he would just say spread eagle right across the front of the screen, and it would just make me laugh. He had fantastic little interstitials when somebody was talking to kind of describe a trope or a narrative function. You'd see like a little clip from like religious materials talking about Mormonism, and tropes for when Joyce was maybe playing a victim. So you saw a clip from some old movie or TV show. And as we first go into the documentary, we get to see the outside of an old TV, and it zooms in to Joyce in the frame. I mean, we're getting layers of media on top as we try to get to the bottom of this narrative. It's super well edited, and it's entertaining. And like I said, we haven't gotten into the Mormonism. We haven't gotten into Joyce's weird view of Christianity. But at no point is there an official version? Is there a version of these events that we know is true? I don't think so. And that's super compelling to me. I mean, I think that's interesting and makes me think and jags my understanding. And there's no other documentaries like Errol Morris documentaries that I've seen.
Was it him? He's the one actually doing the interview, right? Because you do hear his voice. He steers questions a certain way, and he's he's voiced in the documentary, right?
Oh yeah, he's the one you hear him asking questions. He shows. Most documentaries will just show you the response and act like
I know, but I was wondering, do you like that style where you hear the documentarian actually ask the question? That's pretty rare for that.
Well, so I would say yes. I like that he's showing you kind of how he's steering the conversation. But what do you think about it, Eric? I mean, I'm a big Aaron Morris fan, so probably anything you say that he's doing, I like. So what about you?
I think it takes a little of the credibility away from it, because you could tell.
What does that mean?
You could tell he's steering the story in a way he's trying to get the soundbite. Like, he knows the soundbite he wants to get. He already knows the story. She's told it to him already, right? He's just recording it now. And it's like he wants to get her to say the crazy, because she said a lot of crazy things. He was trying to get her to do it. and steer it in a certain way. So hearing his voice, I think maybe took a little bit away from it. I think the cutaways to like the cartoons and the videos, that was the part that kind of disconnected it from me. I didn't care for that as much.
Okay, so I'm going to go back. So when you see another documentary, do you think they don't ask those questions, but they just hide it from you? So
obviously they do. It's just hearing his voice. You know, there was a couple times where he like clarified, like, what do you mean, or what is it that's happening here? And at that point, I was like, okay. I mean, yes, the other documentaries do that. You know, if you look at like The Last Dance, the Jordan documentary, like there were clearly times you didn't hear their voices, the documentarians, but they're trying to get Jordan to say something. I just think it sounds more like their story than his story when you just hear the subjects' voices and not the documentary.
Oh, see, and I think that's more honest. I think hearing the voice makes it more honest. I think it makes it more credible. We're just
because this didn't feel like her story.
It wasn't supposed to be her story. He's not telling her story. Well, I guess
that's the point. I mean, but she thought it was. You know, she thought she was telling her story.
Yeah, she only ever wants one version that's very one-sided and very self-aggrandizing and also making her the victim. And she clearly resents anything that contradicts her. But I love hearing the voice for a lot of reasons. At one point, he asks her straight up what her IQ is, and she says 168. And you hear him ask, and like that's the question. He's not like coercing her to say something. He's not pressuring her. He's like, "What is your IQ?" And she gives it very willingly. And then another time you hear him ask, "Hey, were men attracted to you?" And she says, "Oh, I'm too modest and I can't say it." You hear both questions, and neither one's unfair. He's not really goading her. He's just asking her straightforward, and she's willing to answer the question about her IQ. When she's not willing to answer the question about men finding her.
Yeah, but then it cuts to the pilot guy talking about how hot she was and how attracted to her he was.
I know, he's contradicting her, and he's providing evidence of another viewpoint. I love the contradictions and the back and forth. The ex-Mormon being able to provide some context for like, okay.
It did feel more like a cross-examination than...
Well, and that's a great...
Than her telling her story.
Observation. Because... Aaron Morris directed this movie, The Thin Blue Line, and like I think around 1988, I want to say.
That's the McNamara thing, right? Isn't that the Vietnam deal?
Fog of War. That's 2005.
Oh, Fog of War. That's right.
This one is one where he investigates somebody who's convicted of murder in Texas, and he basically uses all these techniques to deconstruct the official version of what happened from the state of Texas, and he completely obliterates it because he finds all kinds of holes and nonsense and lots of reasonable doubt, and ends up getting a man, free from prison because of what he did. So I think that's an astute observation. Now, maybe you don't like that. Maybe you prefer the documentary where we say, hey, this is the truth. This is the version of our truth, and we think it's correct, and here's our support, and here's us setting up some straw men from the other side and knocking them down very easily, and yay to our view. I mean, maybe that's fine if that's I very much prefer we're not going to make this easy. We're going to see people contradicting each other, and you're going to get different versions. And you're not going to know exactly what the truth is. This is not Joyce's movie. It's not the sleazy tabloid guy's movie. There's 10 other things intersecting, and how you figure out the truth.
Yeah, but it's her life. I mean, without her and what she did, there's no documentary.
Right, but are you obligated to tell just her version then? Is that what that means?
No, I guess not.
See, I mean, that's what's interesting. I mean, she's clearly, her actions are the subject of the documentary, but I don't think he's obligated to say, hey, I got to give you just Joyce's version perfectly. I think the deconstructing and looking at it is what's so appealing to me about not just this movie, but all of Aaron Morris's movies. And this is not one where, you don't just think, this is, I mean, it would be a way worse documentary if it was just like, oh, poor Joyce was maligned. Everything she said.
No, you could have other people contradict her. It's just when you hear him like push and try to question it, it just felt like, he's steering the narrative rather than the documentary or the subject rather than subjects.
He would admit that he's steering it, I think. And other documentary filmmakers would probably pretend like they were being objective. And I find that way more honest. And he's not steering it to convince you of either side. He's steering it to say, Yeah, it's tough to figure it out. You're going.
No, there was a lot.
Media.
One of the guys said in the thing, he's like, there's her truth and their truth, and it's probably somewhere in between, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing.
Sure, that was said,
but
right?
Like
yeah,
that's what he's trying to say. Yeah.
But it's also how you filter the truth through layers of crap, people with various motivations to, one tabloid had the motivation to tell Joyce's version of the story. They wanted to just be a mouthpiece for her. That was how they were going to make money. The other one, was like, we're going to tear her down. And neither one lends itself to the truth. Media doesn't help with the truth. It's filtered through several metric tons of bullshit. This is all media. And meanwhile, there's all sorts of stuff about how religion just kind of is a very interesting phenomenon in the human experience.
This is a good point to jump into the discussion on the religion,
which also interests me about the movie. Anyway.
So I'm not a religious person. Never have been. But there was stuff in this about the Mormon Church, which I know very little. I will freely admit I'm not up on the Church of Latter-day Saints or however it is that they define themselves. But the stuff about the magic underwear, I couldn't believe that was true. And then they interviewed the guy he was like a reverend or something. He was pretty high up there. I didn't care for that guy either. I thought he took away a little bit because he was clearly like he left the church, and I mean he was kind of relaying what they do, but you could tell he was like, not a fan of the Mormon Church. Okay. But then there was
you needed somebody who's objective about how would you be objective?
I don't know,
about
like a religious scholar. I don't know. You didn't need a guy that was involved in it. Just someone to explain to what the church does. Just some sort of scholar. Because he's clearly
talking to people who aren't Mormons. Like this is actually true. This isn't like somebody taking pot shots. This isn't Errol Morris, trying to hating them. I mean, this is actually their own beliefs. This is actually what they do.
Yeah, I just think that guy didn't come off as credible. I thought he came off as somebody who was just angry at the Mormon Church, and
so you didn't believe him when he said this is what they actually do.
No, well, it sounds so crazy. If you die, you get to go to a planet and run the planet, where it's like Thor. The Mormons, is that really what they believe? That you get your own planet when you die?
Yeah. Well, look, I'm not a religious scholar either. I was once a religious man. I am not anymore. So I guess if you're hoping Eric and I were both religious chaps, sorry to disappoint. I took an American religions class. I've seen the play or the musical, The Book of Mormon, and I have read a very casual amount of stuff about it.
So your knowledge is from the South Park guys, is what
I gave you more than just that data point. I actually I read a book about.
Well, that's more than me because I haven't even seen the book.
There is apparently 9 levels of heaven, and there's different degrees you get to go to depending on how you live your life. And yes, they believe Jesus is currently on a planet called Kolob. Up until 1978, they did believe black people wore the mark of Cain, and at some point the elders of the church, who they believe speak directly to God.
The entire church stopped believing that after 1978. Is that what you're telling me?
I'm telling you, the elder looked at the PR problems and was like, all right, this isn't tenable for our church long term.
78. You're talking 78, right?
So we have to stop believing this. This is officially not true anymore because they believe the very top person in the church does have a direct relationship with God, like talks to him. Believe it or don't,
so Mitt Romney was in the church before they decided this. Just checking the
timeline. So I don't know exactly how old Mitt Romney is, but probably yeah. I guess he was born before 78. So yeah. Anyway, they believe this stuff, and if you live your life right to the absolute perfect precepts, someday you and your wife, because of course you have to be straight. There's no gay couples in the Church of Latter-day Saints. You and your wife will get to become.
Can't you have more than one wife in their church belief?
Yeah, that's we're in weird territory. I think some Mormons disagree. I don't know that all of them agree with that precept. I think there's some disagreement amongst Mormons themselves about whether polygamy is or is not okay.
So you got to just be in a specific group of the Mormons, then you can do it.
I guess. Anyway, we're stepping on really murky ground here, but. Anyway, whether Troy's motivations were pure or whatever, and
we got some listeners in Utah. All our listeners in Utah. Sorry for getting all this.
If we said something wrong, I'm prepared to learn from it. I'm prepared to admit I'm an idiot. I'm sorry.
Tweet at Ben and explain how angry you are at his.
Or tweet at Eric because he didn't believe in the magic underwear and he thought Troy was just
I'm
out to
wearing
get
magic
you.
underwear right now. All right, that's how much I believe in all
Are they
this.
Vikings underwear?
Yeah.
That'd be cursed underwear.
Kirk
I think,
Cousins game worn underwear. That's what I have on right now.
Okay. But anyway, he's telling you all the stuff about how they would be entrenched, how guilty they would feel about any sexual feelings, about how he had to confess about masturbating and everybody did the M1, M2. It's not, the whole documentary isn't about Mormonism. It's just to say, hey, look, Joyce might have some points about how, trapped this guy was ideologically. I mean, his entire social structure is in the church. And the idea of like being excommunicated and missing out and not being able to interact with anybody you love or care about is quite an incentive to stay in the church. And so, yeah, if you're offered an out in which you could say, oh, the sex wasn't consensual. It was, I didn't want to do it. She made me do it. It wasn't my fault. She chained me. Totally not my fault. I should still get to be in the church. You might take that because the prospect of just joining some woman you can't know that well and just going off and leaving the church would be a really awful lot to ask of somebody. I mean, this is what a lot of people in various communities and religions do. You just can't get out without saying goodbye to everybody you care about. When you're born and raised and everybody around you is in the same religion, it's, you reinforce the behaviors. That's just how it works. I don't know. It's interesting. You use the word credibility a lot. That's interesting that a lot in this documentary isn't credible. And it's interesting because the fact that it's getting these different perspectives and toys with what is the truth, that makes it more credible to me. I'm way more suspicious of somebody like, this is the version, this is true, this is what's happening. The idea that everything's, we don't know, it's plausible. Joyce's version of this is plausible, even though she's kooky and got some weird stuff going on in her own head. Like she seemed to have some version of Christianity where, hey, if she's doing everything but actual intercourse, she's not having premarital sex. She's saving herself. So despite the fact that she did all sorts of kinky stuff on the side for a bunch of money, if she never had sex with anybody but Kirk, and here, let me put this question to you, Eric. Let's assume that.
Sorry, you lost me at kinky stuff. Sorry. No.
Oh, whoa. Okay, sorry. I didn't mean to distract you.
I tuned it out. No, sorry. What was your question?
So let's say Joyce only ever had actual intercourse with this Kirk guy. What would that make you think about her story? How would that change your perception of Joyce?
While they were in the cabin?
I mean, for her entire life, she did a bunch of other stuff, but she never actually had intercourse with anybody else but Kirk. How would that change your perception of?
Because that's what she claims, right? She did claim.
Basically, yeah. She
was celibate after this.
Before and after. That she basically had sex 7 times in her life with Kirk in this cabin because she loves him and
she just did mouth stuff beforehand. That's
correct.
Right.
Yes, mouth stuff. This is like a version of the loophole stuff, which, I have no idea if anybody's actually done that, but there's certainly heard speculation.
I find that hard to believe that you would be a literal sex worker before you meet this guy.
It doesn't matter that's hard to believe, just accept for the sake of argument that it's true that she does.
So you're asking me to just accept it?
I'm wanting to know how this would change your perception of her. I don't want you to, I'm not trying to convince you that is in fact true. I'm interested in how, if it were true, that would change your perception of Joyce.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I guess then if that's true, then really the only crazy part of the story is did this guy come with her or not? Did she kidnap him or not? And I guess I believe that she didn't kidnap him if that's true.
Oh, that's interesting. I just mean it makes her a little bit more of a tragic figure. It makes me have a little bit more empathy for her. And I don't really care that she was a sex worker because whatever she was.
I mean, I gotta be honest. Money. I didn't find this whole story all that interesting.
Okay.
I mean, the turns were kind of like, whoa, I didn't expect that. Whoa, that's kind of wild. But in the end of the day, it's just about a woman whose fiance went to England and kidnapped him. Maybe did or didn't. Became a big star. And then.
Are you sure he's her fiance?
Well, whatever. This guy she knew. I mean, it doesn't really matter. He disappears and she kidnaps him or doesn't and gets arrested. It becomes a big news story. She becomes famous. And then that's kind of the end of it, other than the dog thing. That's it. I don't know. I guess I didn't find it all that interesting. To be perfectly honest with you, I'm sorry. I know you like this movie a lot, and you like.
Oh no, that's fine.
Documentaries.
I like movies that make me think. You like movies that distract you. Fair enough.
I like movies that make me think. This just didn't make me think all that much. I mean,
oh, then maybe you weren't paying attention. I love there's all those things about how people are perceiving reality through media tropes going on that I think is super interesting too. That's why those little cutaways, that's what's happening. It's both visualizing what the person's saying and also kind of showing you where the sort of foundational beliefs come from as you're just bombarded with media tropes your entire life from a bunch of movies. I don't find the documentary genre like as compelling as you do. It's just not something. Well, I don't. I don't. You're not going to hear me ever on this podcast pick a different documentary other than an Errol Morris one, as we only have one, because they do make me think. Precisely because he does all this stuff that you don't see in other documentaries. You hear him asking the questions. You see that, he's got a big role to play in shaping the narrative, that he's involved. He's not a passive observer of what's happening. He's not, quote unquote, documenting what happened. That's super interesting to me. That's why these movies resonate with me on a
more of a storyteller than documentary.
Well, he's describing, and this is one. I mean, he's got much weirder documentaries. This is, again, I think his funniest and most accessible that I've seen. But I mean, he's got some that I think you would just really hate, Eric, like in Vernon, Florida, where he's literally just like interviewing people in this small Florida community, and it's just a turkey hunter describing how he hunts turkeys and the process and why he likes it, and you would hate it. But he manages to find, to me, super compelling characters, people just out in reality, and get them to just talk in a way that you don't see in other documentaries.
So one thing I found interesting, so this movie comes out in 2010, right? Yeah, September 2010, it premiered at the Telluride Film Festival. She sues Errol Morris in 2011, claiming that the defamation, slander, whatever, through all those claims against him, that she was misrepresented, she was lied to, that the documentary was supposed to be just a focusing solely on the legal case that she had in England, and it wasn't. And so she claims that this was a complete defamation from the perspective of the documentary. Did you know that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, so when this came out, this documentary came out, I mean, a lot of podcasts talked about it. I mean, it was, way back in 2010, 2011. And I don't remember which podcast it was, but one of them, she was apparently quite mad about anybody that talked about it and left a message on this podcast, voicemail.
Oh, is she going to call us?
Well, no, we haven't gotten there. There's a really sad addendum to everything that you're talking right in the immediate aftermath. I mean, she lost that lawsuit. She definitely signed a waiver, she definitely talked a lot and seemed happy to talk. So to the extent that, I don't know, she had a good point, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm very skeptical of things Joy says, especially in her towards the end. But yes, if she were to call us, that would be crazy. But I don't think it's
she's
likely.
On Twitter. I'm just
looking at. Have you looked at her Twitter profile?
No, I'm just looking at it now.
Look at it now.
Thank you to everyone throughout the world for your love and support and clearing my name.
Keep scrolling. You're gonna see 30 posts of Robin Williams dressed as Mrs. Doubtfire saying the same quote. Doubtfire? It's Why does she keep and over and over again?
August 5th, August 17th, August 20th.
It's non-stop. It's some serious all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy shit from like The Shining.
The quote is, "No matter what people tell you, words and ideas can change the world." Robin Williams quote and a picture of him from Mrs. Doubtfire over like hundreds of times.
But
what the fuck?
Right. So she can say she was taken advantage of. Fine. I mean, when you're in a documentary, you don't get to control the narrative if you sign a waiver. So negotiate money or don't sign the waiver. I don't know. I can't view her too much as a victim. I mean, she's not going to like any coverage, I don't think, that makes her look slightly untruthful, slightly bad. I don't think she seems like the type of person that can see herself as, anything but a victim. But the sad addendum, so her most recent Twitter post was 2019, maybe 2020, I think 2019. So there's a sad addendum with her dogs and her. So I think this is 2020. A 91-year-old Holocaust survivor was the victim of a hit and run. And I think there was some traffic cam footage, and Joyce McKinney was the one driving that truck. So she was indicted in like LA County somewhere. At the time, she was homeless, living with 3 of those 5 clones in cages in a truck. I mean, I think since then they gave up those dogs, who were quite old at the time by dog standards, up to adoption. So I mean, presumably 2 of the other 5 had passed away. So, you know, she was not well mentally. She's very charismatic and very smart, and that comes across in the documentary. But, you know, at least in 2010 afterwards, it's tough to look at her as a person who is not facing mental challenges. But anyway.
So is she in jail now, or?
I believe so, yes. That was the last update I could get, is that she was arrested in 2020 and her dogs were put up for adoption somewhere. I mean, this is some very crude Google searching. But yes, her Twitter feed is so bizarre. Everything about it is bizarre. I mean, a quote from Robin Williams once, whatever. Robin Williams dressed as Mrs. Doubtfire. Very weird, but the fact that you're like posting it every day for several days, I got tired of scrolling down. I didn't get to the bottom of the Robin Williams Mrs. Doubtfire thing. Like, I scrolled down through like 2017 and was like, oh, I don't know where the end of this is, but I'm kind of uncomfortable and bored.
Yeah, so February 2020, she was ruled to be not competent to stand trial. And yep. They had scheduled her hearing for August, but I guess COVID probably delayed all that. So she was in a mental hospital, I think, for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, ordered a psychiatric evaluation. Oh, wow. Yeah, that is sad.
It's a bummer. And it's interesting because I think you see Joyce's side of this probably more than I do too. I know you found it boring and not an actually interesting story, but you seem to kind of think you gave her more credibility than I would. I mean, I kind of think everything's a little suspect on her part. So that's interesting. But I mean, at this point, I think it's very clear I love this movie, and you are nonplussed at best about it. But so give me your rating here, since we're on a dour note.
Yeah, so I gave it 1.5 stars.
Oh my God, that is brutal.
Yeah, I found the story interesting. There were lots of twists and turns. I just think ultimately it's like, who cares? I don't know. That was kind of what I was left with. Is like, why is this? Why are we hearing about this? Because there's a million stories of somebody doing something crazy, and there's, you know, news coverage, and some of it's true, some of it's not. The center, I mean, Kanye West, his life story is, you know, filled with this stuff. I don't know. It just didn't seem all that original or groundbreaking. I mean, the cloning dog stuff was just thrown in there at the end, like, what? Okay, all right, that's weird. So yeah, I guess just ultimately it I didn't care too much about the story. So
fair enough.
There you go.
4.5 stars. I mean, as far as why this story, you pointed out to your chagrin that there are all these choices that are different from documentaries, which to me is a testament to how interesting it is. You know, why this story as opposed to another one, you know, I don't know. You can't get everybody. You can't get all the players. For a reason, this tickled Errol Morris's fancy. You know, the intersection of crazy. You get all the crazy accoutrements of religion and sex and bondage and media coverage and sleaze bags. This piqued his interest. I haven't seen a movie quite like it. I think it's better made than, I guess, if you've seen other versions of this movie, I would argue this is a better version of that movie. I haven't seen too many which just try to acknowledge on the front end this, you know, figuring this out is very, very difficult.
Well,
almost impossible.
I read a review that kind of compared it to Rashomon, the Kurosawa movie, where you see like there's like 3 different perspectives of the same event and how that can be different. There was The Last Duel, which just recently came out. The Matt Damon movie. There was 3 different stories. They're all different. One was the truth. The woman's perspective was in the movie. It was like, this is what really happened. And then it's kind of the 2 guys. Adam Driver was the other guy. So there's different versions of that where there's.
But Rashomon's a fictional narrative, and I don't know if The Last Duel is something that actually happened. This is an event that people, plenty of people would have been alive to have been around when that was a news story. To have watched.
Was it a big, I guess it must have been a really big deal that, she became somewhat famous.
It was definitely a big deal in the UK. I have no idea if it was as big of a deal in the US, and obviously I wasn't.
I asked my mom, who's in her 70s, if she remembered the story, and she said, I don't remember that at all. She's like, what are you talking about? I sounded crazy to her explaining the story. She's like, what, Mormons? What? Yeah, so... She didn't remember the story.
That's fine. If your mom was British, I bet she would have remembered it, but she was not. But, is it the most crazy? I mean, the point of the documentary isn't to be informative. It's not really to like, hey, we want to make you aware of this crazy thing that happened. How nuts is that? It's how do you even perceive what's going on here? How are you filtering, truth through the media?
So you don't think this had anything to do with like tabloid news? You thought that was like really not a theme? No,
that's absolutely part of it. Absolutely. No, I definitely think tabloid news is a big part of it. Yes, absolutely.
The sort of damnation of because tabloid news is like some of the worst like things that humans have created. I think. I mean, it's trash.
But the problem is there's a market for it. Like all things,
you go to the supermarket. You stand in line at the grocery store. There's going to be an indictment of tabloid magazines.
This gets back to like Ace in the Hole. I mean, if you don't like it, people read it. It appeals to people's basic instincts. They either want to adore Joyce or say she's.
That's why the Kardashians are popular, because of tabloid news, right? That's all they are. They're literally the manifestation of tabloids.
Or Kanye West. Sure. I mean,
he's got great songs. He at least has some talent and a skill that brought him to fame. So
sex work is a skill, my friend.
Well, that's not why she was famous, though. I guess the story of it, but she wasn't like a great sex worker, as far as I can tell. Maybe she was really great at it. I don't know.
I don't know. I laughed repeatedly throughout Tabloid, and this is the second time I've seen it. Did you not laugh even once when you watched it?
Just the marshmallow in the parking meter. That one got me. Joyce had some great lines. She had some great lines.
She's very smart and clever. I mean, she's charismatic.
The southern, she's got that like real southern. Was she from like St. Louis or something?
North Carolina.
Okay, she had the real southern affect, which was pretty hilarious.
Oh yeah, she added that. I mean, I think that was something she used when she was a sex worker that helped her make a lot of money and was part of her appeal. So I don't know. I mean, I wasn't bored watching it. I mean, that's a funny line. I mean, when the guy just says spread eagle and then the word spread eagle he just emphasizing spread eagle and the guy said it like 4 times. That was legitimately funny to me. I don't know why that guy was so fixated on the word spread eagle, but it was very funny that he was. But yeah, I mean, there's some other Errol Morris movies I would put ahead of this, but I like it. It's a great example of why I like it.
Yeah, we mentioned this in the last episode, but your favorite movie of all time is one of his documentaries, right?
Yeah. Well, it's a movie called Gates of Heaven. It's about pet cemeteries, but it's also not really about pet cemeteries. It's about the human condition, and there's all sorts of colorful characters and people contradicting each other. And I'm like, yeah, this is what people are. This big, contradictory, absurd, kind of sweet, pathetic mess. But yeah, it's not the movie. Someday maybe I want to talk about it on the podcast just so you can be mean about it, and then I can try to convince people that you're wrong and they should watch it. But there's just like the middle of that documentary is just an old woman who's talking like 5 minutes by herself, and she contradicts everything she says. It's wonderful. It's just real slice of life. This is people. But anyway, that's why I picked it. It didn't convince Eric to become an Aaron Morris fan, and Eric doesn't like documentaries, and if he does,
I love a good music documentary.
Okay.
I love a sports documentary. I just, the murder docs are making the murder. This actually reminded me a little bit of that. That's sort of like, wait, what? This is the next, just like you couldn't make up the next twist. The Making the Murderer was kind of that way too.
No, if Tabloid was written as a fictional movie, you'd be like, wait, why did they add the dog cloning stuff? That doesn't make any sense. That's bizarre. That was poor writing. You're like, well, that's what actually happened. Not interesting. See, the documentaries that just inform you about stuff, it's fine. This is information I could get in a 5-minute article.
Well,
somewhere.
that's why, music docs, you get to hear the artists talk about, like the Beatles documentary is the one that just came out about them recording the Let It Be album, but then the long one that they put out, the anthology where they talk about their whole career. Like, I love that kind of stuff. I just, these kind of, your bag of docs is just not really my bag. So
that's not most people's. I mean, I haven't seen The Last Dance. I don't really care.
I'm phenomenal.
Not so enamored with whatever the 98 Bulls or whatever the year is. I don't care. Yeah, they had some personality conflicts. I bet some people got upset with each other at times. I bet that happened. I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah, I mean, you just want to hear about a woman dressed up like a nun and sneak into the country. I guess that's more.
That's way weirder than Michael Jordan being kind of a dick and pissing people off. But fair enough. And a lot of people, most people would prefer The Last Dance. They would prefer the 10-hour, however many hours, 10 hours, 6 episodes, however many episodes.
Did you not watch the Tiger Woods doc? That was incredible. It's amazing.
No.
Now he's gonna play at the Masters. If you're listening to this, it's probably after the Masters, so maybe he played, maybe he didn't. But it's incredible. I love a good documentary. I just didn't really care.
Oh, see, that doesn't. Why do I want to watch a documentary about Tiger Woods? Why do I care?
Crazy. You're nuts.
Why do I care?
Fabulous.
His dad was really mean and made him work really hard. I'm sure. Of course. Your dad was a lunatic. Okay. Understood. Gotcha.
I mean, that has intrigue. It has sex workers, and it has, twists, and then a car accident at the end. Like, it's got all this stuff.
Does it deconstruct sports along the way? Does it deconstruct the game of golf and the absurdity of media coverage of golf?
Absolutely. It talks about race. It talks about how the sport has changed. I mean, it talks about important themes to our culture, if that's what your point is. And Tiger Woods has a perspective. There's other people that have a different perspective on what happened and what goes down. The interesting thing is they don't interview his wife, but I mean, we're getting on. This is a whole other tangent.
No, that's fine. But this is interesting to me because it just gets to at least two different philosophies of documentaries. Because talking about culturally relevant issues is one thing. Deconstruction is a different thing, where you just break it down and you just get to the point where you're like, blah, and you can't really format. I mean, that's where my brain is. And anyway, someday pick that Tiger Woods golf documentary, and I'll probably think, it's fine. I guess.
I love
what will happen. Okay. Well. All right. So this was a documentary. 5 degrees of separation to get to, Field of Dreams, a lot trickier than it normally would be. We talked about this a little bit before the podcast. You said you cheated, Eric. I want to know how you cheated.
Yeah, so I completely cheated. So looking at it, there were if you go to IMDb for this movie, there's 5 people listed as actual cast members of the movie. So it's a little bit tricky to find those, and they're not actors, right? So they're just subjects to the documentary. So I didn't pick any of those people because they're not actors. They're not in other movies. But I did pick somebody who was mentioned in the documentary, and I think there was a picture of him, which is John Travolta. So at one point when she becomes famous, they talk about her going, I think she went to the premiere of Saturday Night Fever, if I remember right. And I think there's a picture of her at the premiere with John Travolta. I may have misremembered that. But and there was at least a picture of her with some of the Bee Gees. But so I picked John Travolta. You can veto it if you think it's bullshit. You can kick me off the podcast. But so I picked John Travolta to start because he's technically referenced and I think photographed in this documentary. I don't know. Maybe you're shaking your head. I can't tell.
No, go for it. It's fine. I've got two, so you can use one of mine. Go ahead.
So I picked John Travolta. He's, like I said, he's in a movie called Swordfish, which I love, from the late 90s, early 2000s. It's a wild-ass movie. But in that movie stars also Don Cheadle, all-time great actor as far as I'm concerned. He's in a movie called Ocean's 11. Casey Affleck is in Ocean's 11 as well. He's in a movie called Gone Baby Gone, where I think Ben Affleck actually directed that movie as well. But in that movie is an actress by the name of Amy Madigan. I think you picked her once. She plays Kevin Costner's wife in Field of Dreams. Got it.
Okay. All right. This was fun. I like the challenge. So I didn't have to resort to just like, here's an image in the documentary. Those 5 credits, there's enough to work with there for me. I'll give you the one that might, these are all arbitrary rules, so I don't know if TV movies count, but I'll give you the TV movie version
first.
No,
doesn't count. You screwed up.
Oh, it's fine. I'll give you that one, but then I have one that doesn't require a TV movie, so it doesn't matter. So we got Tabloid. One of those talking heads is a guy named Peter Torrey, who used to be an actor in like the 60s before he got into being a tabloid journalist, and he's the one that said spread eagle several times.
Okay.
To a comic degree. And he was in a TV movie called Four Soldiers. It's actually, I think, a foreign film, so that's the translated title. I know nothing about it. I have no clue anything whatsoever. It's like a 58-minute movie for TV, plus commercials. So then you have Four Soldiers. And also in that movie is a guy named Bruce Boa. Now, Bruce Boa is not a name you're going to know, but if you've seen Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, he plays a character named General Reekan. I'm going to try to pronounce it. I'm not sure. Rieekan. It's the first time I've ever heard that name, but he's a guy in Hoth who Han Solo goes up to him and says, hey, I got to get out of here. There's some bounty hunter, Ord Mantell changed my mind. I've got to pay off Jabba the Hutt. And the guy that says, you're a great soldier, Commander Solo. We hate to lose you. The guy that says that is Bruce Boa. So he's in Empire Strikes Back. That with Harrison Ford. Harrison Ford is also in Star Wars A New Hope with James Earl Jones, who's in Field of Dreams. Now let me give you the one that is just straight up no TV movies. So the ex-Mormon gay man who you think is not credible and just has an axe to grind against the church, so you didn't believe what he said. He's in another documentary called The Glorious Things Are Sung of Zion. I have never heard of that before. I don't know what that is, but it came out in 2013. It's a documentary about something. But you know who else is in that documentary? A fella named Ralph Nader. Would-be president.
Yeah, presidential candidate, Green Party guy, right?
Yep, famous for consumer, focused.
Seatbelt, right?
Seatbelt, very, very much focused on consumer safety. Ralph Nader has a bit part in the fictional film Fun with Dick and Jane. I've never seen it, but it's got Jim Carrey in it. Also has a woman named Tia Leone in it, who's the Jane of the title. And she is in a movie called Wyatt Earp, starring one Kevin Costner, who is, of course, the star of Field of Dreams. So there you
did it. Wow, that took some work. Boy, round of applause to you.
So yeah, it was there. That's the bit we're committed to. You got to be able to connect it back to Field of Dreams. So it is possible.
You did it, Ben.
So all right, excellent. So Eric, do we have something special cooked up for next week?
Yeah, next week we got another guest. Our second guest on the Pot of Dreams.
I find it kind of funny. I find it kind of sad. The dreams in which I'm dying.
Are you a mad world? Is that...
had. People run in circles. It's a very, very mad world. Yes.
Yeah. So our guest picked the film Donnie Darko. I think you're singing a song from that movie.
I am. It's probably the most well-known song from that movie.
That song is well known. It was in what's the video game? It was in a trailer for what is it? An Xbox game. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But yeah, Donnie Darko. It's on HBO Max. If anybody wants to watch it in preparation for our next week's episode. So Donnie Darko. Yeah, that's up next. Well, thank you. Thanks to there's another shout out to Go Iowa Awesome. Appreciate all the support.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah. Any love you can send us. Like, subscribe, 5 stars. We love it. We love even positive feedback. We had a very nice comment on the website encouraging us to keep going. Thank you.
If Joyce McKinney's out there listening to the Pod of Dreams, or if anybody knows how to get in touch with Joyce McKinney, if she's doing okay, have her contact us. Let's get her on the pod. Maybe she can break down the Hawkeye season, season preview. Tell us what's going on with her. All right, well that's it. Have a great night.
Bye.